All right, so medical marijuana laws in the U.S. Um, pretty hot topic these days, and I know a lot of you out there are trying to figure out how it all works, right?
Yeah, it can definitely be confusing, especially with the laws changing so much.
Exactly. And, we found this breakdown from the legal strategist. It's really interesting, and we thought we'd do a little deep dive to try to help you navigate this whole world.
It's a complex world for sure. I mean, the US doesn't just have one medical marijuana law, it's like this whole patchwork of different state laws.
Right. So it's definitely not a simple is it legal or illegal kind of situation.
Not at all. Some states have really gone all in on medical marijuana, and others are still, pretty restricted.
So where do you even start? Like, how do you even know if it's legal where you live?
Well, that's the first step, right? You've got to look up the specific laws in your state. A good place to start is usually like your state government website, maybe the health department section.
Okay. So let's say you find out it is legal in your state. Does that mean you can just go ahead and start using it?
Ah, not so fast. Even in states where it's legal, there are still rules about who can actually use it. Like they have lists of qualifying medical conditions.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and actually the legal strategist video talked about this really interesting case in California. There was this patient who had a rare skin condition that wasn't specifically on the list of qualifying conditions, but they ended up suing for the right to use medical marijuana and they won.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, and it just goes to show how this whole area of law is always evolving.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So it's not just a set list of conditions. There's room for interpretation and legal challenges and all of that. So what are some of the conditions that typically DO qualify?
Well, some of the most common ones are chronic pain, PTSD, epilepsy, and cancer.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does the whole process actually work? Like, say you have one of those conditions. Do you just tell your doctor and get a prescription?
Haha. No, I wish it were that easy. You usually need to get a recommendation from a doctor who is specifically licensed to evaluate patients for medical marijuana use. And even then, you usually can't just walk into a pharmacy and buy it. You have to apply for a medical marijuana card from your state.
So there's like this whole other system almost on top of regular healthcare.
Yeah, pretty much.
So what's the point of the card then? What does that do for you?
Well, that card is basically your proof that you're legally allowed to buy and use medical marijuana in your state.
Okay, so you've got the card and now you want to actually buy it.
Yep.
Where do you even go? Can you go to a regular pharmacy?
Nope. The only places that can legally sell medical marijuana are licensed dispensaries.
Dispensaries. Got it.
And even those dispensaries have to follow a bunch of rules set by the state, about like what kinds of products they can sell, how strong those products can be, stuff like that.
Okay. So let's say you've got the card, you found a dispensary, you've got your medical marijuana. Are you free to use it wherever you want at that point?
No, not really. Just like with alcohol, there are laws about where you can and can't consume marijuana. Like public consumption is almost always illegal, even in states where recreational marijuana is legal.
So even though it's medicine, there are still restrictions on how and where you can use it.
Exactly. And things get even trickier if you need to travel to another state.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking about that. What if you're going to a different state that also has a medical marijuana program? Do you need to get a whole new card?
It depends, unfortunately. Your card from one state might not be valid in another state, even if they both have medical marijuana programs. And then on top of all of that, there's the whole issue of federal law.
Right, because marijuana is still illegal at the federal level.
Exactly. So even if you're following all the rules in your state, if you cross state lines with marijuana, you could still get into trouble. It's really a gray area.
That's crazy. Okay, so I have a question about work, because all of this is making me think about employers. And what happens if you have your medical card and you're using marijuana legally, but your employer has a drug testing policy?
Yeah, that's a big concern for a lot of people. The problem is there aren't really any consistent employment protections for medical marijuana users across the board.
Really?
Yeah, so in a lot of cases, even if you're legally allowed to use medical marijuana, your employer can still fire you if you test positive on a drug test.
No way. So it doesn't matter if you have a medical card and you're not using it at work or anything?
Unfortunately, not always. The video actually talked about this woman in Colorado who was fired from her job after she tested positive for marijuana, even though she had a medical card and never used it at work. It ended up being a huge legal battle.
Wow, that's wild. So
Yeah.
basically, even if it's legal for you to use marijuana for a health condition, your job might not care.
Unfortunately, that's the reality for a lot of people right now. It really raises questions about employee rights and how these laws are actually playing out in the real world.
This has been really informative. but it seems like there are still a lot of questions about medical marijuana.
Absolutely. And as more states continue to legalize medical marijuana, it makes you wonder, how is this going to affect federal law down the line? I mean, are we going to see more consistent regulations across all states eventually, or is this state-by-state patchwork going to continue?
That's a really good question. Something to think about for sure. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope this has given you some things to think about. As the legal landscape around medical marijuana continues to evolve, we encourage you to stay informed, find out what applies in your specific situation. And let's keep the conversation going online. We want to hear your thoughts on this whole evolving topic.